Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be with you here today. Today is the release day of Cupboards All Bared, which is book 2 in the Spokane Clock Tower Mysteries. The first book, Butcher Baker Candlestick Taker, came out last October, and it has done so well. And I want to thank you for all of the wonderful reviews that I've received and all of the enthusiasm that has been following this book since its release. I am so excited because now you get to continue the story with me. This is Cupboards All Bared. It takes place a month after the events of Butcher Baker Candlestick Taker, so you will want to have read the first book. I'm writing it as a series, so unlike, say, Agatha Christie or Dorothy L. Sayers, where you can pick up any Lord Peter Wimsey or Poirot book in any order, you will want to read these in order. I compare it more to, say, Anne Perry and her wonderful series, or Elizabeth Peters. You do want to read them in order. The characters build on each other, and you'll just fall in love with them more and more, hopefully, as much as I do, the more you read the series. Beta readers have had nothing but wonderful things to say about these books, and I'm so excited, and they are so excited for all of you to finally be able to join in with them in their reading of these books. I thought it would be fun today to share a reading from Cupboards All Bared with you. Archie Prescott was knocking down walls with sound. Walls of glass, that is. One of his favorite stories growing up had been the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho. He'd been very young when he'd first suggested to his father that one day he would bring down walls with sound, just like Joshua. His father had laughed and said, "These days men are more interested in building walls between people and countries, rather than breaking them down." His father had misunderstood. Of course, as he stood next to the Japanese inventor, Matsumoto, he wondered if maybe both of them had been correct. Through experiments with sound theory, he and Matsumoto planned to break down walls in many different ways, but for today they were starting with glass. Matsumoto set up the thin pane of plate glass between two vices from his workshop and then took a step back. Bang, bang, bang! The glass wall shattered. 50 feet away, Archie stood, banging one of Mrs. Curry's old cooking pots with a metal spoon in front of a large conical funnel aimed at the wall. "It seems it does not matter whether we use a brass, tin, or steel pot," he called out. Matsumoto pushed his white shirt sleeves higher up his arms, though they were already rolled above his elbows, and pulled out a pad of paper and a pencil from his blacksmith's apron pocket. Although blind and therefore unable to read his own handwriting, he was still capable of reading and writing. He and Archie had taken to using a thick pencil that pressed into paper with something firm behind it, in a way that engraved the words onto the page, allowing Matsumoto to feel the words while Archie could still see them. "I count 5 attempts with each," Matsumoto called back. "Shall we try the cast iron next?" Archie nodded as he approached to assist in sweeping the broken glass bits safely to the ground, and then realized he should probably say his yes aloud, even though Matsumoto had the uncanny ability of using his hearing to see far more than one would expect of a blind man. It was this ability which had allowed him to continue in his trade as a blacksmith, even though most people would think blindness the end of his career. Matsumoto replaced the notepad and headed to the workshop to grab another glass pane from the collection set neatly inside, well away from the funnel, so as to ensure they were kept whole until it was time. Archie was pretty certain he was living the dream, getting to work alongside an absolutely brilliant mind on something that he'd thought only interested him, while also working on his clockwork masterpiece for which he'd traveled from Connecticut. That was pretty extraordinary. Even though Matsumoto had offered him free room and board in exchange for his assistance with his research, Archie had insisted on paying him the stipend the Seth Thomas Company had sent along with him for lodging. It was the least he could do. Matsumoto had designed a sound gun that combined his ironwork skills with something he called echolocation. It had the possibility for multiple uses, from assisting others afflicted in their ability to see, to a weapon that could maim rather than kill, which might even end wars before they could begin. Like Archie, however, he didn't have a prototype that worked as yet. They hoped that through the combination of Matsumoto's experiments with sound and Archie's familiarity with complex small machines as a clockmaker, they might be able to begin making prototypes of their ideas. Thus far, they'd managed to work together amicably, but Archie had worked with others before on projects, and things had not ended well, at least, not for him. Then again, if they could survive both of them being suspected of murder, they could probably survive anything. The events of last month had rattled him a bit, what with being considered as a possible butcher by his previous landlords, but in the end the Carews had also become good friends. And then there was Marion. He sighed. He could almost smell her seated beside him, laughing at his words and joking about the trials they'd survived together since their chance meeting not so long ago. Discussing books and desperately trying to avoid the subject he knew she wanted to talk about. Her secret. He sighed again and tried to turn his thoughts back to their experiment. Once Matsumoto had the new glass pane in place, Archie hit the cast iron pot and a low, reverberating tone like a gong rang out and threw the funnel toward the glass pane. But this time the glass did nothing. He tried again, trying different parts of the pan and hitting them repeatedly in quick succession, but nothing worked. I suppose that explains why the Crystal Palace of the Great Exhibition was made of cast iron and glass, Archie said, as he crossed to where Matsumoto stood. Matsumoto nodded and ran a finger over his chin, considering their next move, giving Archie a chance to catch his reflection in the glass. Like the dog in Aesop's fables, he studied his reflection and didn't like what he saw. He'd given up his attempt at a fashionable mustache after realizing it would never look like anything more than a caterpillar, but that unfortunately left his face bare for all to see, other than his frog-eyed glasses. He was cursed with cherub's cheeks and 2 chins, 4 if he tilted his head down just right. That would have been adorable on a baby, but were less than admirable on a man who'd be 30 this year. The roundness of his features didn't stop at his neck either, but continued in curves upon curves all the way down to his toes, or at least he imagined so, for he hadn't seen them in years. He wished he'd been born into a time when the girth of a man symbolized great wealth and power. If he'd been born a redhead, he might have been able to pull off a worthy impression of King Henry VIII in his later years. But he wasn't redheaded. Dull black curls instead. And this wasn't the 15th century, or whenever it was the king had made his name as a wife-killer. His thoughts returned to the beautiful redhead that was a part of his life, and he sighed once more. There was nothing for it. He was doomed never to be his maid Marion's Robin Hood, but only ever her Friar Tuck. Thank you for joining me for a reading from Cupboards All Bared, now available in all formats, ebook, audiobook, and print. I hope that whets your appetite and encourages you to go and pick up a copy of Cupboards All Bared, and if you haven't yet, Butcher Baker Candlestick Taker. Again, this is book 2 in the series, so I strongly recommend that you read book 1 before diving into this one. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day.